Hello, sir. This is Neera Bali here. Hello.
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, can you hear us?
Hi, Sridhar. We can't hear you.
Ma'am, can you hear us? Very good afternoon.
Hello.
Hello, ma'am.
And also the screen, it's all blank. There's nothing there. Shravan window. No, but Shravan has only chat. I cannot say anyone, Sridhar.
Okay. Okay, sir. Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of IFHE, we welcome you all to the 12th Foundation Day lecture on Atmanirbhar Bharat Challenges in Implementation by Dr. Rajiv Kumar, Vice Chairman, Niti Aayog, New Delhi. Now I request our Honorable Chancellor, Sir, Dr. C. Rangarajan, and our Vice Chancellor, Dr. J. Mahendra Reddy Garu, to come on to the dais.
Okay, I have the screen now.
Thank you, sir. Now I request our VC, sir, to start the proceedings.
Hello, Sridhar. Can you please wait for 2 minutes? Because sir is yet to join.
This meeting is being recorded.
Sridhar, can you please wait for 2 minutes? Sir will join in 2 minutes, please.
But mana idea balunda? అది కరెక్ట్ అది వెయిట్ చేస్తాను బట్ మన ఐడియా ఎట్లుంది
Yes, Sridhar. Oh, double था ना sir? I had also logged in. I was also logged in and
आज तो बैठ के ही बोलो
हाँ बिल्कुल आप बैठ के कर
स्टैंड अप
जी
नमस्कार राजीव कुमार here.
the sound
Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon.
Are we starting?
Yes, we are starting. Good afternoon to all of you. Are we audible, sir? Professor Rajiv Kumar, are we audible?
I can't hear.
No. No. Let them know what I am talking. Yeah. You see? Let them know. You see? Let others know. Is he able to hear? Then let's look at that. Yeah. Our voice is not reaching.
Who's-
Hello. Good afternoon. Are we audible? Sir, can we proceed?
There's a lot of echo,
Yeah.
huge amount of echo.
Yeah.
No, I'm muted now.
No
Earlier,
problem.
even there's a lot of echo when they speak. I can't hear. Yeah. जी.
able to hear now. Yes.
But will Rajiv Kumar be able to hear?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Madam, are you able to hear me? Madam, are you able to hear me? Madam Bali? Yeah. Is Rajiv Kumar able to hear us? Oh, no. Oh. No, can at least both of you hear? We can start. Huh? Beg your pardon? Hello?
Hello? Madam? Unmute. Yes, madam. Yes, madam. Okay.
Hello? ఇక్కడ మాట్లాడండి.
Hello? Yeah, I've done it, madam. Hello? Yeah. Our VC sir is speaking now. Yeah.
ఇక్కడ పెట్టండి, ఇట్లా పట్టుకోండి కాసేపు. Am I audible, Madam Bali?
Only on the phone.
But is Rajiv Kumar able to listen to us? So do you want to? Yeah. Okay, and then he can speak. I will speak only for about 7 or 8 minutes. Okay. Let us start. The Chancellor of the University, Dr. Rangarajan, Chief Guest, Dr. Rajiv Kumar, Madam Shobha Rani SSV, Mr. V.R. Shankara, Professor R.P. Kaushik, Professor U.B. Desai, Professor Bhanuji Rao, Professor Ved Pureshwar, Professor B.K. Bhattacharya, distinguished members of the Board of Management, advisors of IFHE Society, chancellors, vice chancellors, pro-vice chancellors, directors, deans, heads of the department, coordinators of different programs, distinguished members of the faculty, support staff, my dear students, media, ladies and gentlemen. I have great pleasure in welcoming you to all to this 12th Foundation Day lecture. At the outset, I would like to say a few words about our Chancellor, Dr. C. Rangarajan, for the benefit of the students. Dr. Rangarajan was the Governor of Reserve Bank of India and Governor of the combined state of Andhra Pradesh. He was former Chairman, Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister and also the Chairman of the 12th Finance Commission. He is currently Chairman, Madras School of Economics and President C.R. Rao Advanced Institute of Mathematics, Statistics and Computer Science. Dr. Rangarajan was recipient of several prestigious awards including Padma Vibhushan in 2002. On June 29, 2020, he received the prestigious Professor P.C. Mahalanobis National Award in Official Statistics in Lifetime Achievement category for the year 2020. This is a recognition of numerous outstanding contributions, sir, you made for the Indian statistical system. In August 2021, Dr. Rangarajan received Professor C.R. Rao Centenary Gold Medal instituted to commemorate his contributions to quantitative economic theory and practice, along with world-renowned Professor Jagdish Bhagwati, Professor of Economics, Law and International Relations at Columbia University, New York, for their lifetime contributions to the field of to the fields of theoretical and applied aspects of quantitative economics and official statistics. Today's chief guest is Professor Rajiv Kumar. He is the Vice Chairman, Niti Aayog, in the rank of a Cabinet Minister. Dr. Rajiv Kumar has a PhD in economics from Lucknow University and later at Oxford University. He has wide experience of having worked in academia, government and industry, as well as in multilateral institutions. He became the director and CEO of ICRIER in Delhi between 2006 and 11. He was also professor at the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade in Delhi and a senior fellow at the Center for Policy Research. He was in the Asian Development Bank in Manila for 10 years before returning to India in the year 2004. He was also the chief economist of the Confederation of Indian Industries during 2004 to 6 and Secretary General of Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce and Industry during 2011-13. He was a member of the Central Board of Reserve Bank of India. I once again thank you, sir. Thank you, Professor Rajiv Kumar ji, for consenting to deliver this 12th Foundation Day lecture. The first lecture in the series was delivered by Professor C.R. Rao on January 19, 2011 on the topic Statistics, Learning from Numbers to Generate New Knowledge, and presided over by Dr. Abid Hussain, the then Chancellor of the University and former Indian Ambassador to the United States. It was attended by the founder of this university, Mr. N.J. Yashasvi. The second Foundation Day lecture was delivered by you, sir, Professor Rangarajan, the then chairman of Madras School of Economics, on India, on the topic India and the global economy. Again, presided over by Dr. Abid Hussain, the then Chancellor in the year 2012. I wish to say just 2-3 minutes on what the topic is. Atmanirbhar Bharat is a phrase proposed by the Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji and Government of India in relation to economic development of the country. I applied to my mind as to what this is. It refers, among other things, to self-reliant India. The idea is, you must have heard Prime Minister saying several times, make in India for the world implies the fact that we produce in India at a competitive price so that Indian goods will be preferred in global markets because of their competitiveness, which will lead to increased exports, which in turn will lead to increased incomes and employment, improve trade balance, improve balance of payments, and strengthen the rupee. The topic is, what are the challenges for Atmanirbhar Bharat? The challenges to achieve this is better infrastructure to reduce the cost of logistics, and you might have seen Madam Finance Minister presentation on 1st February on increased allocation to infrastructure. Quality manpower, you must have seen national education policy focusing on this point again and again. Linkage between industry and academia, again focused by the national education policy. Ease in doing business, this is extremely important, to ease in doing business and ease in living. Improve supply chains so that cost of production is reduced. The other aspect of Atmanirbhar Bharat, one is make in India for the world. Second is, other aspect of Atmanirbhar Bharat is startups. There are many opportunities in many sectors like agriculture, health, education, fintech, pharma, etc. Challenges are many as success rate is low. Success rate is low in startups. Most important is to create a mindset among the youth and students in higher education institutions in India to develop a culture to take the risk and not always look for a 9-to-5 job. Equally important is the need for them to identify a product or service which is acceptable to the market and establish the demand. Demand is the most crucial thing for startups. Find out a product which can serve the society better than what is available now. Also create the necessary infrastructure in the higher education institutions to have incubation centers and encourage the startup culture by encouraging higher education institutions to coexist with industry. It may be noted that exposure to courses with practical experience will benefit the startups. Number 3, accelerating startups scaling up to unicorns is another challenge. India lags far behind China, but the potential is there to catch up by India, at least by Amrit Kaal. Finally, a point which I like to mention, sir, is what is the role of inbound foreign direct investment? Foreign direct investment entering the country, and foreign direct investment going out of the country, from India to different countries in the world, in Atmanirbhar Bharat. This needs explanation. I now request Professor Rajiv Kumar to deliver the lecture. There will be a 10-minute question-answer session. Please put your questions in the chat box. If anyone sitting in this auditorium has any questions, please write it on a piece of paper and pass it on to Mr. Nagender, Mr. Nagendra is standing there, so please pass on the question to him, and that will be read out by Professor Sanjeev Datta, who is going to read out the questions based on the chat box. Thank you, sir. Now I request Professor Rajiv Kumar to address. Thank you, sir. We can't hear.
In achieving Atmanirbharta.
This meeting is being recorded.
So, for me, Atmanirbharta, I should start by saying it does not in any sense mean a closed economy. That's something which we have never ever implied. It's never been implied, and I think should not be implied. It's not a closed economy. Self-reliance is not the same thing as self-sufficiency, and therefore we need to be quite clear in our minds that what we mean by Atmanirbharta is a globally competitive economy, which, as Professor Reddy mentioned, the Prime Minister's remarks, that by that we mean make in India for the world, and that's what self-reliance is about. And self-reliance is about, in my view, increasing our share in the global flows of merchandise and services trade. Some of these shares, especially for merchandise trade, have been stagnating for a while. And I think it's time that we give ourselves the target, a rather ambitious target, of quadrupling our shares in the next 20 years in global trade of merchandise and services. This can be done. It has been shown by Asian economies and by China that these shares can be increased, and therefore we have to now embark on a path that our exports don't rise in consonance with or along with only when global trade is rising. But like Vietnam and Bangladesh, we can increase our exports even at a time when the rate of growth of global trade is coming down. And that's the only way we'll be able to increase our share in the global economy. And the second aspect of that is that we need to ensure that our share in global flows of technology and finance also increase as we go forward. That is when we will become Atmanirbhar or self-reliant. The other aspect, the economic aspect of being self-reliant, in my view, would be that we ensure that at least by 2047, when we will celebrate the centenary of our independence, our per capita incomes are at least equal to the global per capita income of today, and maybe even of that time, and if at that time even better. Let me expand. In 1990, I think, our per capita income on average was about 6.3% of the global per capita income. China's was about 6.2% of the per capita income. We have improved a lot since 1990 because of the reforms that we undertook, of which Governor Rangarajan was an integral member of that team, and I used to be the economic advisor in the Ministry of Finance. We have done very well, one can say, because today our per capita income is 18.5% of the global per capita income, which is today seen as $11,000, 10,919, something like that. But friends, China's per capita income today is 89% of the world average, global average. So it can be done. Between 1990 to now, which is a period of about 30 years, the Chinese growth has made sure that they have grown to that level. And so can we, and we can set that target for ourselves. And that would be the real meaning of self-reliance, because if we achieve the global per capita, today's global per capita income in 2047, we will be about a $17.6 trillion economy, surely the third largest in the world. But if we aim higher, which we should, to say that we will be equal to the global per capita income of that time, of 27 years, 25 years from now, then our economy would be more than $25 trillion, and that's what should we be aiming for if we want to call ourselves reliant. Why? Because below that per capita income, we would not have completed our economic transition to a middle income country. I'm not talking about joining the OECD club, which South Korea successfully did, Taiwan has done. Not that, but even to become capita average should be our target in order to become self-reliant, because that's what our people need as we go forward. Another dimension of Atmanirbharta is environmental self-reliance, because it is so important to recognize this today, that India does not have the luxury, as other countries have done, to retrofit, to do what we can do now, to develop howsoever we can develop today, and then retrofit later. You must have all heard of the story of the Tokyo Bay, which was full of mercury, of the River Thames, which it was said that if you put your hand in, only half the hand will come out, or of the Aral Sea in Central Asia, which is half of which is now completely dried up, the southern half of it, and it's sort of all the acrid sands circulate around Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan. We can't afford all of that, not for ourselves and for our planet, say. So therefore, self-reliance must imply environmental sustainability. And this is why I think we need to make sure that our net zero target that the Prime Minister announced at COP26 of reaching it 2070 is reached in advance, because I think even that might be too late. In my view, and what I have heard from various experts now globally, is that we probably have a 20-year window, and in which we don't not just have to reduce reduce our emissions, but we have to now reverse the temperature rises that have already occurred, and we have to reverse the carbon content in the atmosphere. And that's India's responsibility. It's a huge responsibility for ourselves and for the entire planet. But we have the tradition of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. We have the tradition of not fighting with nature, but living with nature. We have the tradition of worshipping trees and animals and all beings. So therefore, we have to live up to our own tradition of saying that yes, we will live with the Prakriti. We will save our nature, and we will achieve our development, our self-reliant development, while taking care of our environment. Which is why, again, the target of reaching 530 or renewable means by 2030, which is by the target of shifting to electric mobility as far as possible, and removing all ICE engines from our roads by 2030 and beyond could all be our targets for achieving a self-reliant India. Friends, the most important part, one of the more important parts of this, as I said, is to remember that today is the time when we need to work for the reversal of climate change. And that would mean carbon sequestration in a big way. And that is not easy. We are talking about in NITI Aayog of carbon capture and carbon utilization technologies. We are talking about shifting to the hydrogen economy, and those transitions will be made. But those transitions will help us. The only way that has come to my notice for reversing carbon, which is already there in the atmosphere, and sequester it into the soil is through agroecology. Please remember that agriculture contributes as much, agriculture in our food system contribute as much as 36% of greenhouse gas emissions. And they have contributed to the increase of carbon in the atmosphere. The Institute of Soil Sciences in Bhopal tells us that when we became independent, the organic carbon content in the soil was 2.5%. 1.5% of organic carbon content is required to keep our soil arable. Today, most unfortunately, the organic carbon content in our soil is a mere 0.5%. We have made our land unarable almost, which is why we need increasing quantities of chemical fertilizers to keep our food production going, which is why we keep increasing our soil degradation and keep using more and more water and exploit our groundwater in most unsustainable ways in so many states of our country. So what we need to do is to switch to what we call natural farming, which is also known as agroecological farming or chemical-free farming. It is now proven 30 lakh farmers are now practicing it in Andhra, Himachal, Gujarat, Maharashtra, UP, and parts of Rajasthan, where they don't use any chemicals at all for the farming. And once they don't do that, the soil converts to humus and it starts increasing the organic carbon content in the soil by sequestering it from the atmosphere. The plants also are able to then absorb the moisture from the atmosphere. And I didn't know, and I don't know how many of us know, that there is 7 times the moisture, water in our atmosphere than what we find in our ground and surface waters. I mean, there are basically rivers of water out there which can be fixed if we have the right kind of plants and the right kind of cropping patterns and the right kind, the agroecological way of farming. So I think, friends, this is another aspect of our self-reliance, which is to transform our agriculture, make it much less costly, make it much more productive, make it much more nature-friendly, improve our farmers' incomes, which can be done, net incomes, which can be done by lowering input costs and getting them better prices, which they will achieve by producing the natural crops, natural product that they do. And for that, what we need to do is to set up marketing chains. We have to set up marketing chains both globally and nationally, because that's the one big weakness for our farming community and for agriculture. The linkages to our markets and the linkages to global markets are very weak. Also, the processing is almost negligible. Only 10% of our agricultural product is currently processed, and we need to improve that many times over, so that this naturally produced farm product without chemical inputs, which will also improve the health of our farmers and stop these cancer trains from Bhatinda to Bikaner and other places in Orissa, but also get them better prices, for which we need to improve their marketing linkages. And for agriculture, we of course need the logistics to be improved, and I can go into it later. So that's my sort of third dimension of self-reliance and Atmanirbharta. And a part of that, ladies and gentlemen, is not just about food security, not self-reliance in food security, but self-reliance in nutrition, which is completely different. If you look at the National Family Health Survey 5, which has just come out, you will notice that unfortunately, despite having achieved food security thanks to the Green Revolution and all our wonderful farmers, today our nutritional status is not improving the manner that we want to improve. Food security is not equal to nutritional security. And we should be therefore talking about shifting to millets, about changing our cropping pattern, and also changing our cropping pattern to not export and not produce a necessary quantity of water-intensive crops, which is what we are tending to do at the moment. So I think that's all of that. A major agricultural transformation today is required for our country to be truly Atmanirbhar in our nutrition status and also in the incomes and the welfare and the living conditions of our farmers, which are 12 crore households and no less. And third aspect, of course, is about equity and the elimination of poverty. And I think here, let me just point to the fact that this government has been focused laser-like on what we call Antyodaya, which is to improve the lives of those at the bottom of the pyramid. And there are so many schemes which I don't want to repeat or go into, which have been targeted for that. And some of these schemes have been delivered. And we know about the JAM Trinity. And again, some of that was started in the previous government, which is the Aadhaar number, but combined with Jan Dhan accounts and the mobile phone revolution, I think we have now created a much stronger, much more robust system of direct transfers of benefits to the targeted beneficiaries without the leakages which have become legion in our country and which we have been able to stop in about 400 schemes already, and also in other aspects like food subsidy with one ration, one nation, one ration card, etc. And I think it's time to consider the suggestion made by Francois Bourgogne, the World Bank chief economist at one stage, which is that we need to start measuring the last decile of the population. I think that's an exercise that some of us need to do. And all of you there in these universities and the economics faculties, I think this is a challenge that we need to pick up for estimating that, and we can do it for different states. And I think that will be possible because that should be our target. Have we been able to improve the per capita incomes in the measure required of the large decile of our population? I think then the last one that I want to mention is our regional equality or regional equity. India, as you know, is more diverse, is larger, is bigger than the entire Europe, from London to Moscow. Our diversity is our strength, and our diversity is to be celebrated. But our diversity also implies that we cannot have a Chinese model of development where 400 million people shift from the coastline back to their original villages at the time of the lunar holiday. That sort of migration, I don't, and traditional and national conditions. I think what we require, and which is why the Gadgil formula was so important, is to achieve the regional equalities, to create incomes and jobs and employment in where the people are, where the people reside. But I think that's the important again. And to repeat myself, the current model of development that we have, which is the increasing difference between the northwest on the one hand, on the west and south on the one hand, and the north and east on the other, is not sustainable. And I think therefore we need to make sure that we get regional equality as well as we go forward. And we need to think through very differently. And I think there, my own 4.5 years in NITI Aayog have taught me that for this, probably the most important part, the most important aspect that we can take is to try and develop state-specific development blueprints. Forget the idea of pan-India economic policies and economic measures. Each state in our country is a country in itself, in its own peculiarities, in its own differences. The commonality between Manipur and Gujarat will be very difficult to come by. The commonality between Sikkim and Tamil Nadu will also be equally very difficult to come by. So I think it's time that we have started doing this in NITI Aayog by localizing our sustainable development goals for each state. We have taken it further by localizing the sustainable development goals and estimating them for each district in the northeastern region. And I think therefore time, and we in NITI Aayog are now committed to doing this. We are engaging in the spirit of cooperative federalism and cooperative and competitive federalism with each individual state to try and work with them to come up with their development blueprint, because what Punjab needs as an export strategy is a double landlocked state. What Punjab needs an export strategy as a region strategy will be completely different from what Orissa and Tamil Nadu and Gujarat and Kerala need. So just as one policy as an example, I try to draw your attention, we need a differentiated approach towards all these policies. So friends, that's my understanding of Atmanirbharta, and to re-emphasize, it's not self-sufficiency, it's being globally competitive, getting integrated even more with the global trends and making in India for the world. On the challenges, I think my time, I've probably run out already. Let me just therefore be rather concise, and which is that the biggest challenge is to make our private investor become far more active than what it is, and for the government to become a much better enabler of private investment in the country. And that, I think, for that, what we need is to cede more space to the private sector. I think, and that's what we are doing, and we are committed to that. Cede more space, economic space. Time for capturing the commanding heights, etc., is probably gone. The second one that I would mention, and the Prime Minister talked about on the August 15th, is to reduce the compliance burden for the private sector. 67,000 compliance and regulatory burdens have accumulated over time. We need to abolish them. We need to sort of banish them, as it were. And that again is a state-specific task, because that's where rubber meets the road. And NITI Aayog is working with individual states to ensure that compliance burden gets reduced. That's the second one. Third, of course, we mentioned is the ease of doing business, but that will come automatically with the compliance and regulatory burden being good. But finally, about this in terms of government as enabler to promote, to infuse, to give the impetus to private investment and private investor is, I think, building the trust between the private investor and the government. This whole notion of us and them, I heard the other day, and I was dismayed. A very senior secretary to the government of India saying, "Oh, I have never ever shared a cup of tea with a private industrialist." Now those days are gone. We have to work together with the private sector. All of us are working with the same national agenda. Whether it is we have to build the trust between the private investor, between the government, the academia, and the civil society. All of us have to be on the same page. And this is not going to be easy, but this is what we must achieve. This is what we must start doing. And this is, I think, this is the critical in achieving Atmanirbharta. Because unless with the rest of the world, because in the rest of the world, people come together, they work together. And in countries where they do, they succeed. In countries where they don't, like Latin America, they remain trapped in the middle income trap, as they've done for ages now, and we don't want to be there. Friends, I can go on, but I think I know I'm running out of time, but one important part here in which I think NITI Aayog, two important things that NITI Aayog has now done in the required mention. One is to change the entire tenor of our education system. The education policy is going to do that. I'm not going to dwell on that. What we Niti Aayog are doing through Atal Innovation Mission is to establish what we call the Atal Tinkering Lab in our secondary schools. We established 9,500 of them already. 70% of them are in government schools, 60% of them in government schools, and 40 in the private sector, private schools. And these Atal Tinkering Labs expose our children at the age of 14 to 17, 14 to 16, to the latest technology, whether that's optical sensors or electronic ventures or 3D printing, under the mentorship of people passing out of IITs and other senior colleges and technical colleges. These 9,500 Atal Tinkering Labs will be ramped up to 50,000 in the next 5 years. And that will change the tenor of our school education from what we had inherited of the learning by rote and the Macaulay formulas, to those who will innovate, who will create jobs, and who will startups, who will do startups and become unicorns. So I think that's the culture, the Atal Tinkering Lab, the Atal Incubation Center, the startups, and the innovators, which we want to generate. And that's, I think, one of the best things that Niti Aayog has been done in the last 5 years. The second thing that Niti Aayog has done, again, which I think will be transformative, is to really institutionalize the system of monitoring and evaluation in our country. The Program Evaluation Office was established, I think, more than 42 years ago, I think, if I'm not mistaken. But to institutionalize that practice and have monitoring and evaluation on the basis of output and outcomes, institutionalize that is what we've achieved in the last 5 years. 57 ministries, their central schemes and centrally sponsored schemes have been monitored, have been evaluated on the basis of the targets that they have set themselves. And we are doing this in consultation with the Department of Expenditure. And the hope is that soon enough, their budget allocation will become dependent on their performance of outcomes and outputs, rather than on the inputs rather than the outlays that they have been able to achieve. 73 government ministries and departments have also been able to, we have been able to work with them for all the schemes to be able to monitor them similarly. And we are now trying to expand this to the states. We have, tomorrow is our second National Conference on Monitoring and Evaluation. Why am I referring to that, my friends, is that we know for a long time is that the quality of public expenditure has to improve significantly. The quality of our governance has to improve significantly. And monitoring and evaluation can be a critical tool in improving accountability, transparency, and getting the governance to deliver for our schemes as well as for our service delivery under all those schemes. So I think this is time now to deepen this to every level of the government, to the state, to the Panchayati Raj institutions, to the urban local bodies, etc. I think this is where this is what we need to do to meet the challenges of Atmanirbharta. Friends, for me, sectoral shares don't matter really, whether we achieve it through mining or agriculture or manufacturing or services. The key is to achieve the parity with global per capita incomes in the next foreseeable future, in the next 25 years. If we do that, we'll be able to deliver to our younger generations what they deserve and meet the aspirations, which I know are exploding, because this younger generation has been born in the post-1990 era, and they do not know the pre-1990 era of shortages and scarcities and so on. I think that is what we should be committed to, and I hope that IFHE will lend its hand to make sure that each state in our country has its own development blueprint, and that we can start on the road for each state to achieve that per capita income parity with global per capita incomes. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity and listening to me with such patience. Namaskar. Jai Hind.
Uh, Am I audible? Am I audible, sir? Delhi?
Hello, this is Sanjeev here. Are we going to the Q&A session now, or?
Yes, we are going for the Q&A session. At the outset, I'd like to thank you, sir, for your excellent exposition of the concept, challenges, and remedial measures. It was a fantastic, and we are extremely grateful to you for giving such a great lecture. Now, we'll have Q&A. Q&A. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
So now we have Q&A, Q&A session. So Sanjeev Datta, can you ask look at the chat box and ask the questions?
Yes, sir. So I'm going to the chat box. I just see one question coming up. So the question is, Dr. Rajiv Kumar, sir, the question is basically, how can government of India, basically they want to help and provide private sector all the infrastructure facility which will aid the manufacturing sector. But then why is government closing down on public sector organizations? Why are they doing that? Because they are trying to promote the private sector, but we also see a lot of private sector, public sector organizations being shut down by the government. So why can't both coexist?
At all as to the government working, having done anything to close private sector organizations, none whatsoever. I mean, in fact, what this government is started and is committed to is the privatization of public sector enterprises. So therefore, create greater space and greater opportunities to the private sector. I think so. Therefore, there is some misunderstanding here as far as I can make out. Because as I said, I have no reason to believe, and I have not seen any evidence, any at all. In fact, what this government has done, on the other hand, is to redefine higher definition. So 10 times those definitions have been increased so that they are encouraged, to expand their businesses and not remain dwarfs or midgets. This government has given extraordinary credit guarantees during the time of the pandemic, so that the small private sector could borrow from the banks and survive and face the difficulties that they were faced with, address the difficulties. So that's I don't think that's a correct impression in my view. On the infrastructure side, you might have heard of the National Infrastructure Pipeline, which was for 100 lakh crores that has been prepared. It's a set of projects, a thick volume set of projects, which has now been converted to Gati Shakti, which is actually trying for seamless multimodal infrastructure connectivity across all our infrastructure sectors, so that we want to connect our ports and railways and roadways in a manner that transfers become seamless and painless. And Gati Shakti is now being launched, and you will see that under this program, the logistics difficulties that are faced by the private sector, and I recognize them, because our logistics costs are about 14% of total cost, while the global average is about 8%, and we need to bring that down to make our industries competitive. That will happen, and I think this is where this is what we are doing. The highest speed of highway construction and the airport privatization and the ports construction has been achieved by this government. So the government is committed to improving the physical infrastructure as well as the digital infrastructure, and therefore the overall connectivity, so that our private sector and private companies can thrive and become globally competitive.
Okay. Any other question? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, sir. I think in the interest of time, we'll take one more question. We'll just limit to one more question. So the question is, do we have enough infrastructure facilities in this country to reduce the carbon emission and also at the same time maintain quality agriculture production and also encourage startups? What you have spoken about, what kind of infrastructure do we envision to enable all these things that you have spoken in your speech?
Well, there are several aspects of the infrastructure. Some I have mentioned already, so I would not like to repeat those. But how do I say this? I mean, we are creating, the GEM portal, which is going to benefit all the people who are trying to supply products competitively. We have improved the electricity. All the villages in the country are now connected. So the latest NFHS survey says 98% of households are now connected by electricity. That's infrastructure. Under the BharatNet program, 1.5 lakh of our gram panchayats are already connected. Another 2 lakh gram panchayats will be connected. Now the tender is going out. The railways have committed now to become 100% electrified in the next 10 years. So that's being achieved. The number of, so I think all of that is being done. About agriculture, as I said already, we need to develop our logistics, our warehousing, our pack houses, as they're called, and market linkages with the global markets, etc. But here I just want to take this opportunity to mention one thing which I had forgotten to mention, that this is the first time, I think, in our country that the government has embarked also on an active industrial policy by selecting 14 sunrise sectors for what we call the production-linked incentive schemes, for which the government has committed nearly 2 lakh crores, which is about $27 billion over the next 5 years, to be given as fiscal incentive for firms which will achieve global competitiveness and global scale. So for the first time, we are encouraging private sector firms to take advantage of these schemes and create capacities in all these 14 sectors, which are electronics and phones and advanced pharmaceutical ingredients and so many of them to become globally competitive. And I'm hoping therefore that the target for them to achieve $500 billion worth of output in the next 10 years will be met, and they will create the promised 7 million jobs under this scheme, which will transform the manufacturing sector in the country as well.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your clarifications and for your observations on the tremendous amount of emphasis the government is giving for the development of the physical as well as the digital infrastructure, and for your observations on the sunrise industries, on the 14 sunrise sectors and the incentives the government is planning. Thank you, sir, very much once again. Now I request Professor Rangarajan to give the presidential address. Professor Rangarajan.
Mr. Rajiv Kumar and friends, we are indeed very grateful to Mr. Rajiv Kumar for his fine address this evening.
Is it audible?
Is it audible?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, right. In fact, we are very grateful to him for clarifying what Atmanirbhar means. It has been loosely translated into English as self-reliance. But the concept of self-reliance has a history in India. It is subject to many interpretations. Immediately after independence, we talked of self-sufficiency in food. Then we talked of self-sufficiency in almost every other area. And this led to the adoption of a policy of import substitution, which in fact had disastrous consequences. We ended up with a high-cost economy. And as a consequence, India's share in world exports, which stood at 1.78% of world exports in the 1950s, came down to 0.4%, less than half of 1% by 1960. This was what happened as a consequence of an interpretation of self-reliance or self-sufficiency as it was adopted at that time. In fact, even in areas like textiles, where we were leading, were a major player, we ended up by becoming a small player. And in order to provide support to exports, we need to think in terms of policies like providing inputs to export-oriented industries at international prices and so on. So it was. So it is this kind of interpretation which was abandoned in 1991, when we made a break with the past, about which Rajiv Kumar mentioned, as when he was also involved with it. When we made the break at that time, one of the elements in the break with the past was to give up this policy of import substitution and embrace world trade. And in one sense, I would say that the balance of payment situation is one of the success stories of liberalization. Before 1991, we went to the World Bank, we went to the International Monetary Fund every 10 years because we had to cope up or we had to tide over the balance of payments difficulties. But we were in a position to be able to build up reserves, and the export growth rate picked up. But I must tell you, even after all of this, that the share of India in total exports of the world today is only back to 1.78%. As Rajiv Kumar mentioned, we really need to travel a lot more. In fact, the concept of free trade has a lot of theoretical support behind it. It does lead to optimal distribution of production. But there are rules of the game. All members of the World Committee have to play the rules of the game. Otherwise, it can get distorted. That is what happened, and that is what made some countries to move away from free trade. We always talk of free and fair trade. What we mean by it is the free trade plus the rules of the game. So we must realize that adopting a policy of trying to boost our exports by levying or increasing the import duties is something that we must avoid. That is a tendency that is noted in many countries, and to some extent in India too. I think we should not really move in that direction. Please remember that in the service sector, we are a dominant player in the world. In the IT services, we are an important player. And look at many of the leading IT companies in India. 90% of their product is actually exported. Therefore, we should not we should not spoil the overall environment. We should not be part of it at all. I think we need to create an overall environment in the world where we need to ensure that all people play the rules of the game. What is really required is for all the countries in the world to come together and ensure that the WTO becomes a strong institution and all people follow the rules of the game. And therefore, I think we need to move in the right direction. It is true to some extent that globalization has taken a beating because of certain concepts of self-sufficiency adopted by many other countries. And look at it in the recent Russia and Ukraine war. Globalization has taken another beating. Now people are thinking, countries are thinking, what happens if we are dependent extremely on some other country? Like, for example, India. It is not only the countries which are involved in the war, Russia and Ukraine, but also other countries. When the prices of oil and gas goes up, what happens? Therefore, security considerations have come as another important element in this whole discussion on globalization. And people are thinking that what needs to be done. And therefore, I would think that, yes, our extreme dependence on import as far as oil and natural gas is concerned needs to be modified. I think we need to have an energy plan. I'm sure that NITI Aayog is looking at all of this and really establish a strategy by which the energy planning model can be constructed. But let me once again say, for security or other reasons, there may be certain areas in which that extreme self-reliance, in the sense of not importing it from outside, may be relevant. But these sectors must be limited. In all the other areas, as Mr. Rajiv Kumar very clearly and categorically pointed out, we must be able to compete in the world and we must hold our own in the world system. And that is what is really required. So that is the interpretation that you must make. He clearly said, make in India is make in India for the world. It is not make in India for India. That is what import substitution policy meant. Make in India for the world is the new self-reliance policy that you must follow. And we should make India an appropriate destination for people to come in, for enterprises to come in and produce in India, because we have the infrastructure, we have the talented people, and we have the structure, we have the right kind of an environment in which these things can happen. So that is the direction in which we should move. Certainly, Mr. Rajiv Kumar went and talked about some of the areas in which we really need to activate and move forward. He mentioned about agriculture, he mentioned about reducing the poverty, he talked about bringing down the regional imbalances, and so on. One thing that has been happening is that the investment sentiment has not yet picked up. We are all talking about India becoming a $5 trillion economy. But simple calculations show that from the present level of round about $2.7 trillion economy, it requires India to grow at 9% per annum for 5 consecutive years. Because of COVID-19, we have already lost 2 years. We need to grow at 9% per annum for next 5 years. One thing that has happened is, it throws back the question. It is all right, we need to grow fast. But what drives growth? What is it that we have to do in order to achieve that high rate of growth? And the answer is that what we have seen in the recent period is, from a high of something like 34.5% of the GDP as the investment rate, the latest number that is available is for 2020-21 is 28.2% of GDP. There has been a steep fall in the investment rate of the economy. Therefore, what we really need to do is to pull up the investment rate of the economy. The savings rate has also fallen. cannot depend upon external savings to fill it, to support the investment to a large extent. Therefore, we need a high rate of growth in the economy. And if we need to have a high rate of growth in the economy, we need to have a high investment rate, and that is the direction in which we have to move. We have to enable the creation of an environment in which the investment rate will pick up. What else should be done? There are many things one can talk about it. Rajiv Kumar also mentioned about the sunrise industries. There are some sunset industries. And if there are sunset industries, we should really push them away. There is no use trying to support them. But what are the sunrise industries? I would say the sunrise industries are not only chip making. People think about that very much. But there are sunrise industries also in food processing. He mentioned about agriculture and the importance of activating the increase in agricultural production. But agricultural production, if it increases beyond a point, can be profitable only if we have appropriate food processing industry. From time to time we hear of tomatoes being thrown on the road, some other commodity, some other vegetable not being utilized. Why? It is precisely because we do not have the appropriate food processing industries to take the surplus at the time at which the surplus is available and convert it into a convenient food. So there are, I think we really need to understand, study the situation, identify the industries in which the new investment happen. And therefore, we need to raise the rate of growth of the economy. For raising the rate of growth of the economy, we need to raise the investment rate. And while raising the investment rate, we also need to identify the sectors of the economy in which new investment must happen and how it is linked with the overall growth. Let me end with one more point. Rajiv Kumar also mentioned about equity. I would really think that if many people talk about the fact, after Piketty had written his book, that the inequality in income in India has increased. Perhaps it has. And COVID-19 has perhaps led to even the worsening of the situation. Because COVID-19 led to the unemployment of the vulnerable groups, the daily wage earners, the migrant labor. These are the people who are affected extremely by COVID-19. Therefore, I have a feeling that that's what must have happened. But what we really need to do to look at in a developing economy like India is not so much at the inequality of income, like measuring the Gini coefficient or something, but reducing the poverty in the country. Our goal must be to see the number of people below a defined poverty line comes down as fast as possible. Let us not worry about what the 10% or what 20% does. But if we can eliminate poverty in the country, that should be the way in which we should look at the problem. There are two ways of doing it. One is to ensure the growth process itself is such that the percolation happens to the bottom deciles of the population. Growth does not exclude them. So that is one thing. The second is that we need appropriate social safety nets to support these people. It is in the high growth period we were able to introduce the Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme. We were able to introduce the extended food security system. Therefore, if the economy grows fast, when I say fast, I'm really thinking in terms of 8 to 9%, then the resources will be available with the government to provide the social safety nets. Therefore, in the Indian context, I would really look at growth ensuring a reduction in the poverty, both through the process of growth itself and also partly through the social safety nets that can be built up. Once again, I would like to thank Rajiv Kumar for clarifying what Atmanirbhar means. The clarity has brought, in fact, much satisfaction to people who have been thinking about it, because we do not want a throwback in time. We want to move forward, and in moving forward, as I said, it is not self-sufficiency, it is self-reliance. I think we need to make a distinction between self-sufficiency and self-reliance, and in that sense, that we should not neglect being part of the global trade and the global economy. Certain areas may be reserved for total domestic production, but the rest we should be able to, as I said, compete and hold our own in the world system. Once again, Mr. Rajiv Kumar, thank you very much for being with us this afternoon and delivering very enlightening lecture.
Thank you, sir, very much for making, again, further emphasizing on the concept and presenting it as the most important aspect of Atmanirbhar Bharat is make in India for the world. And that itself is a challenge, so India has to improve in terms of its productivity and competitiveness. As well, the other points mentioned, namely reduction of poverty, reduction of inequalities, reduction of regional imbalances, are equally important. Sir, you have rightly emphasized on the investment, which higher levels of investment are necessary, higher levels of savings are necessary to achieve higher rates of growth. And importance of not just investment in sunrise industries, so that you have got important sectors like chip making, food processing, where investment should be diverted for better growth opportunities. In other words, we have to try to combine growth, reduction of greater equity, reduction of inequalities, and poverty. This should be the strategy for the development. Sir, thank you very much for your excellent presidential remarks. Now I request you to present a memento virtually to Professor Rajiv Kumar. Sir, Madam, is Rajiv Kumar there? We want to present a memento virtually to Professor Rajiv Kumar. Can the phone?
He is in a meeting with a minister now.
Okay.
So in fact, he's asked me to sit in for him and to take it on his behalf, sir.
Okay.
So I shall be grateful
So this is being presented.
if this could be handed over virtually.
Yes, yes.
And I will pass this on to him, sir.
Okay, Madam, this is the memento, and this will be sent to Professor Rajiv Kumar as soon as possible. Thank you very much for accepting.
Sure, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Jai Hind.
Thank you. Please convey our thanks to him again. Thank you. Now I request Madam Shobharani Yashasvi to present a memento to our Chancellor, Professor Rangarajan. Madam Registrar to propose a vote of thanks.
First of all, we are expressing our sorry to all of you for creating inconvenience to all of you. Hope you'll understand. On behalf of IFHE, I want to thank our beloved Chancellor, Dr. C. Rangarajan, for presiding over the 12th Foundation Day lecture and for his presidential remarks. Thank you so much, sir. You have enlightened the different aspects of the Atmanirbhar Bharat. Thank you so much. I want to thank today's chief guest, Dr. Rajiv Kumar, Vice Chairman, Niti Aayog, for delivering keynote address on Atmanirbhar Bharat, challenges in implementation, and sparing his valuable time on the occasion of 12th Foundation Day lecture. Thank you so much, sir. Just I'm adding one line to that. As Atmanirbhar Bharat is the vision of our Honorable Prime Minister Modi ji for making India a self-reliant nation, I feel that the basic pillars are economy, infrastructure, systems, vibrant demography, and demand. You and sir has enlightened us on the challenges and implementation of Atmanirbhar Bharat. In one line, I want to give my opinion. Atmanirbhar Bharat can be put into practice once the Atma within us is understood what actually the Atmanirbhar Bharat is. As citizens, as individuals, as teachers, we should first understand what is Atmanirbhar Bharat, then only we can implement to the fullest possible extent. Of course, it takes time, but that is the destiny of all of us. Thank you, sir. I want to thank our Vice Chancellor, Dr. Mahendra Reddy, for his constant support. I want to thank Madam N. Shobharani Yashashvi, Chairperson of IFHE Society, for her esteemed presence and support and encouragement all the time. Thank you, ma'am. I want to thank Sri V.R. Shankara Garu, President, Board of Governors, IFHE Society, for all the support and guidance. Thank you, sir. I want to thank Pro Vice Chancellor, Dr. Bijut Bhattacharya and Dr. R.P. Kaushik, Member Board of Management, and Professor U.B. Desai, Advisor, Professor Banoji Rao Garu, our teacher, for their esteemed presence here. Thank you, sirs. I want to thank Professor Ved Purishwar, Advisor IFHE Group, and Mr. Sudhakar Rao Garu, Director Branding, and his entire team for making this event a grand success. Hope you will understand the problems involved in that. I want to thank all our directors, deans, area chairs, faculty members, research scholars, students, and to all those who have participated. Our special thanks to admin staff and academic support staff of IFHE. Thank you one and all. This comes to the end of this particular event. Now I request esteemed guests and all other members to join for high tea. Thank you one and all.